Okay, so in the next Koontz book we got, second book published, I believe his. Um, get in frame here. Follow the Dream Machine. This is from, I believe, 1969. Also an Ace double book. The other half is The Star Ventures by Kenneth Bulmer. This one, I don't know, it was lots of fun. There was a lot of action, very like Star Warsy. I would explain it though more as a mix of like the Truman Show and Total Recall, if with a little bit of the Matrix thrown in. It seems like to really presage the Matrix by a long ways. It's a lot like that Black Mirror episode that was called I think it was called 10 Million Merits, where they did that a parody of American Idol, except then when you win you have to become a porn star. You remember that? That's always crazy. But this is oh, like I said, published in '69. It was It's obvious that the U.S. president in this book is modeled on Richard Nixon. When he's introduced, it's with a mention of the tape recordings he has at the White House, which is ironic considering this was actually written before Watergate. So that's ironic. This story takes place in a future world where no one can read because computers can read to them. And I'm like, doesn't that sound familiar to us, past 2023 now? So due to technology, people become so lazy and complacent, being able to because they're able to ask for anything and receive it immediately, kind of like the Star Trek's replicator and like the later Star Treks. Um, and then in 1989, in his novel Midnight, which is up here somewhere, I think, Koontz repeated the same theme of this book. I'd say a mad scientist zombifies countless people, but then is destroyed by his own arrogance. I won't spoil this one too much. If you can get a hand on it, it's kind of fun. Just like in Star Quest, the hero Mike wants to get back to his lady love, his true love, who's called Lady Lisa for whatever reason. To rescue her, Mike gets surgically altered to look like an important political enemy of his, so that he can take that enemy's place in a position of leadership. Um, which sounds a little bit like something that also happens later in the Koontz book, The House of Thunder, where doppelgangers are taking over governments, etc. Um, but in a way, the villain scheme in this book reminds me a lot of another Star Trek episode where Wesley saves the crew from addiction to a brainwashing game. And then there was a book of here I found called Sudden Fear that I think I mentioned in the intro, and it has a whole bunch of crazy info about Koontz. And so I was going to read like an excerpt from here because it's probably better at like pointing out some of the synopsises and the psychological background of the books. So on page 79 of here it says, in his 1969 novel The Fall of the Dream Machine, Koontz brings us a world quite nearly ruled by the electronic media. There's no television. There's only SHOW, show, which is experienced by 700 million subscribers daily. Show is a complete sensory experience. Subscribers do not simply watch actors playing roles, they become the actors. They see what the actors see, think the same thoughts, share the same tactile sensations, and it has made media addicts of the world. And there is but one pusher, Alexander Cockley, the director of Show. He's an evil man who seeks to rule the world, a deadly man who enjoys ordering others to their deaths. And long before Freddy Krueger of Nightmare on Elm Street fame, Alexander Cockley had razor-sharp retractable steel blades in his fingers, which he used with deadly accuracy to persuade others of his way of thinking. The horrors in these novels do not ascend from the depths of slimy swamps. They do not need to turn into bats or wolves or bug-eyed monsters. They are just men being controlled by other men, and they are scary as hell. In comparing these evil men, often turn to evil deeds from a groupthink mentality. There is one major There is one major difference between those appearing in Koontz science fiction and his later novels. In his horror and suspense books, these men are generally renegades. They may work for the government, but they are involved in agencies so classified and subclassified that they no longer represent attitudes of the government at all, assuming, of course, that the government is even ruled by sane men in these stories. Therefore, once these men are beaten and exposed, the hope remains that others will not be able to abuse the power given them. At the end of the novel, we return to the free people we're meant to be, living in a free society. And in these books, there is always hope. But this is not so in general in science fiction. Generally, these books take place far into the future, so far that the government has been unrecognizably restructured. Or, for that matter, the government might as well be an alien one, literally. Often, this governmental restructuring is secondary to some cataclysmic event which forces society to give up the freedoms that we take for granted. Evil men in these books are not renegades. They represent a world different from our own that has different values, an alien code of ethics, because the old world has changed. And even if the protagonists manage to escape into the mountains and be free of the sadistic government, military leader of an Earth alliance or a world federational government, whatever, the fact is that nothing has really changed in the end. The madness has not been beaten, but merely temporarily outsmarted. The oppression continues. Many times early in such futuristic novels, hope is lost. Hope, hopelessness, optimism, pessimism. These are perspectives that more often than not differ science fiction from horror and mainstream fiction. And they are the perspectives that differ from the Koontz of 1970 from the Koontz of today. Anyway, I found that quite fascinating and just a wonderful summation of science fiction and the differences between its attitudes since then, which are, of course, not readily apparent until you've read, hundreds and hundreds of books. It's taken me 30 some years to, go through this collection. But thank you. See me in the next part, and we'll get to